So we're in the second chapter, and as we said, the first chapter dealt with the world of the 10 sefirot. From the second chapter on, we're talking about letters and the creative power of speech. This, of course, goes back to the story of Briat Olam. In the first chapter of Bereshit, the creation of the world is through speech, divine speech. And the assumption here, as we said, I think probably before, is that in Judaism, words and speech do not only depict a objective existing reality, but actually creates a reality, and something which is much more understood nowadays, that we realize so much of reality and our experience of reality is not something objective, but it connects to our consciousness, and our consciousness is often verbal. The way we talk about things, the way we present things, the way we talk about them is actually creates that reality. Okay, so we have divine speech, and now we will start with the second Mishnah of the second chapter of Sefer Yetzira. In fact, I'll mention that these Mishnayot, there's an Israeli singer called Victoria that just came out with a new disc, and the disc is simply, a lot of it is simply taking these different Mishnayot in Sefer Yetzira and filled with pathos, singing them, and you get a feeling for the depth of these words. 22 otiyot yesod, 22 letters of foundation. Chakakan, the letters are, we carve out the letters. Chatzvan, after carving out, we remove the letters. Sarfan, after the letters are created, we could mitzaref, to combine the letters. Letters combined create words. Shaklan, we weigh the letters. Weighing the letters is connected to the concept of gematria, the numerical value for every letter. And hamiran are also different methods of permutations between numbers and letters. V'tzar ben kol yitzur, and we could draw a picture all of creation. Vet kol atid litzur, anything that ever, all that is and all that will be is formed through the connection between different letters. So there are a lot of very significant issues here. One issue I'd like to talk about is the general movement in Sefer Yetzirah between the one to the many. In fact, a lot of what the Kabbalah deals with is that interaction between the oneness of God, or as we saw, the before one, what you count, to the multiplicity of existence, and to understand the story, how from the one we got the many, allows us also to go back from the many to the one. So it's very important to understand this interplay. And one way we do that is here we know that all of existence could also be expressed in language. And here we're saying that language underlies existence. Now in language, there are infinite things that could be said or written. And there are infinite possible permutations of reality. But all these things go back to, hello, welcome, go back to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There's a story that when the Chazon Ish was very young, he told his father that he knows all of the Talmud, all of Shas. So the father knew that the Chazon Ish was pretty bright, but this was a little bit more than he expected. And then the Chazon Ish proudly said that he knows every single letter in Shas, he knows every letter there. So a reminder that all language, anything that will ever was written, is being written, or will be written, is all permutations of these 22 letters. Okay, so we have an example of going from the few to the many, 22 letters that expand and combine to create everything. But we have this realization that everything really goes back to these 22 letters. I'll mention that in Medrash often talks about, there's a saying in the beginning of the Medrash that God looked at the Torah and created the world. The Torah as a blueprint of reality. But in the Holy Zohar, it doesn't. It starts by saying not the Torah, but the letters. Seeing that the letters of the alphabet, these are again the building blocks, and in many ways, so the light is really in the letters. And there are stories that people in times of crisis simply saying the letters, realizing that the letters themselves are vessels that have the light, and in their combination, sometimes it's revealed. Very similar to the analogy we spoke about last time between chemistry and atoms and letters. We know that everything that is composed of different atoms. And the periodic table gives us all sorts of different types of the different various types of atoms that we have. But the energy is really in the atoms. So atomic bombs is when you release that energy. But all that is, all the molecules, all that is different ways to link up these atoms together. But the energy is in the atoms. The same way, the letters themselves have a spiritual value. And their combinations create the words that create language and ultimately depict or even create all that is. Okay? But now even the 22, it didn't start with 22. In the first chapter, we saw how the 22 letters evolved. How in spoken language, the one ruach, the one breath of ear, how that gets broken up into 22 letters. Or we spoke about about how the physical manifestation of the written language evolved in the first chapter. Hello, welcome. So very much thinking back to the first chapter, the 22 letters don't only create the infinite permutations of language and existence, but the 22 themselves really go back to one source. First chapter would be Ruach Elohim Chayim, the spirit of the living God is the source of all of these letters. But here we also see that image, because when we're talking about the formation of the letters, it's also about a carving out from a one. Because when we talk about, it's not creating, it's carving out the letters. It's separating, chotzev, to separate the letters from where they're connected, like a stone quarry. Usually the word chakak and chatzav are used for in quarries. Quarries, is that how you pronounce it? We take stones and from this one block of stone we carve out and then separate the various building blocks that build whatever we want to build. Okay, so this Mishnah is very significant in that theme that comes back all the time, the connection between the one and the many, and of course realizing that this helps us finding our path back to the one, to discover the one that underlies all. Another aspect of this is that I mentioned that human language really creates the consciousness that underlies everything. Here we seemingly be talking about the physical reality of Yetzira, of creating all that exists. But they are versions of manuscripts of sefer Yetzira that instead of tsar bemet kol hayetzor talks about you creating all the nefesh hayetzor. The language creates the soul of all that is, and that I would understand as the consciousness that underlies everything. So even here we're not talking about the physical reality, but the manifestation, almost similar to as Plato would talk about the world of ideas. We have the idea, and ultimately we'll have a physical manifestation, but the creating of the idea itself, the idea of the table, is the source, and that would be similar, I think, to this manuscript that talks about the letters creating the nefesh, the idea, the consciousness of all that is. Okay, so now we have, so this was the second Mishnah. Now we'll go on to the next Mishnah, which I believe has a dramatic turning point. The next Mishnah says, starts again with the same title that all the Mishnayot start with. 22 otiyot yesod, 22 letters of foundation. Chakakan bekol, we carve them out in our voice. Chatzvan beruach, we separate them in the ruach. Kav'an bepeh, we establish them in our mouth. B'chamisha mekamot, in 5 places. Aleph chet hey ayin begaron, in the throat. Gimel yud chaf kuf b'chech, in the jaw. What's part? Forget my English. This part.
Talks about this part.
All right. What's
The upper part of the mouth.
Bridge.
what's the bridge? Okay. Dalet tet lamed nun taf belashon, with the tongue. Zayin shin reish tzadi b'shinayim, with the teeth. Bet vav mem pei b'svatayim, with the lips. We breathe in ear. Without the ear, we can't talk. On the moon, there's no ear, you can't talk. The ear comes in, and sound is created when this one breath of ear, it gets broken up or stopped in different places in the mouth. Now, the 22 letters are first broken up into 5 parts of the mouth. So it's 5 categories of letters, and there's again the subcategory. Between the 22 letters, between these 5 groups. It's been pointed out that in the word Breshit, the first word has a representative of all of these 5 categories. So here again, going that process of the one to the many, after saying in the previous Mishnah, from the 22 letters, all that is formed. Here we're saying the 22 letters that themselves start with one breath, that ultimately in 5 places will develop to 22 letters. Okay, so it completes our journey back to the one. What makes this Mishnah so significant is it reminds us that just like we are speaking about divine creation, God creating the world, we're also talking about human creativity. Because clearly here, we're talking about the physiological process of speech, which gets us back to another major theme of Sefer Yetzira. If one theme is the one to the many and that interplay, the other theme is the parallel between human creativity to divine creativity. Divine creativity is with speech. Human creativity is also with speech, which we saw in the 3rd Mishnah in the 1st chapter, that talks about 2 places in the human body that express the Brit, the covenant with God. One of them is the classical place, the organ of reproduction, which is connected to creativity, bringing new life into the world. But Sefer Yetzira also says there's also the Brit of Milat HaLashon, that also the tongue, also there's a Brit, a covenant with God, which the meaning would be is we create like God by giving birth to new life. We create like God with our speech, and this Mishnah really puts that into place, showing the physiological phenomena inside of each of us begins with the one and turns into the many. We are all Tselem Elohim. We are all in the image of God. Now, I think there's a tremendous message that should be taken from this Mishnah. We know that one of the great revolutions of the Chafetz Chaim was avoiding Lashon Hara, avoiding negative speech, a major issue within Judaism. Meaning, of course, the Chafetz Chaim did not innovate it. There are endless sources, but he created a consciousness by writing his book Chafetz Chaim, by endlessly talking and pushing about this subject. In our consciousness, the severity of misuse of speech has really gotten very well ingrained, although of course we still have quite a way to go in order to fulfill this this vision of avoiding negative speech. However, I feel that Sefer Yetzira is giving us an additional message, no less important. And I think in many ways, if we look at the difference between halacha and Kabbalah, we'll find this distinction. Halacha often deals with what not to do. If it's talking about speech, it's all the laws of forbidden speech. If it's talking about men and women, it's all the things that are forbidden in terms of men, women, and modesty between them. If it's talking about Shabbat, it'll talk about what is forbidden to do on Shabbat. But in Kabbalah, it builds on that, doesn't replace, but builds on that, and gives us the positive. For much of the Zohar deals with the sanctity in the connection between men and women. Much of the Zohar deals with the holiness of Shabbat. And Shabbat is not only about what you don't do, what you do, or at least what is the experience that's created of being through the not doing. The same is true relating to language. It is an essential message to remember, don't misuse speech. But what will change the world, what will save the world, it is not only avoiding negative speech. Speech is a blessing. Onkelos, in writing on the verse that God created us, gave us nefesh v'yipach be'apav nishmat chayim. God blows into us a soul. Onkelos writes about us that nefesh chaya is a ruach malala, a life that speaks. Speech is an essential part of what makes us divine. So the vision is not to keep our mouths shut, but the issue is not just don't misuse speech, but use your ability to speech to bring more light into the world. It's just like saying that if Judaism sees problems with different aspects of immorality between men and women, it's not saying become a hermit, but rather Judaism sees it as a major essence of life, marriage, and the connection between men and women. So too, just like we talk about Lashon Hara, we must talk about positive speech. Words that bring light into the world. Words that are an expression of our Tselem Elohim, of the holiness inside of us by speech. So at the end of the day, don't just make a checklist how many negative things I said today, but at the end of the day, make a list about how often today did you bring more light in the world by saying things that are true to the people that deserve to hear them. So I remember learning this. So whenever I talk about this, I get more conscious, and it's always amazing that it's so easy just to say a few words to the right person at the right time, words that the person deserves, and how much you could connect. And as a result, I think this will also solve the problem of negative speech. There's so much negative speech because people are so disconnected with each other. If we had more positive speech, people would be more connected to each other, and there wouldn't be so much negative speech. Okay, so negative speech is often a cry for connection, a expression of pain, of loneliness and disconnection. But the way to do that is connect. I was just in Jordan and at this conference in Amman, and one of the interfaith groups there said that their slogan is connection before correction. So often there are conflicts and everyone's really angry at each other, but that could go on forever. First connection, then correction. First connect. If you're connected, it'll be much easier to correct. If you're disconnected, you're never going to get there. Okay? So this is our message for Mishnah Gimel. Okay. Now we go on to Mishnah Dalet. Mishnah Dalet and Hey the commentaries here have been used in all the Jewish lore about creating a golem. It primarily goes back to these two Mishnayot. There's a book by Moshe Idel Golem that tells about the whole development of thinking about golem in Judaism. And I'll mention that he argues the impetus for creating a golem in Judaism is not that we need another bodyguard, like in all those stories about the Golem of Prague, but simply the feeling is that to get close to God is being like God. If humanity could be more, could create, the ability to create life will put us in that point of divinity that creates life. And by that, that'll make us closer to God. So it's really part of a mystical desire to create a golem. Okay, so Mishnah Dalet Hey, and then another story. 22 otiyot yesod, kav'an bigalgal. Establish them in a circle. Okay, galgal means circle, but also galgal is also used to mean the cosmos. In terms of our approach to the cosmos itself as something circular about it, and we'll see that later in sefer Yetzira, the circle or a wheel, the circle of the cosmic circle, the cosmic wheel. Galgal is also significant because Galgal is something that Yecheskel sees in his Maseh Merkava, his vision of the heavens. So the Galgal has cosmic significance to it. And again, a reminder that what Sefer Yetzira is interpreting the story of creation, of the beginning of Bereshit, based on the vision of Yecheskel in what is called the Maseh Merkava. Okay. 22 Yesod Kav'an Begalgal. You establish them in that wheel or circle. Kamin Choma. It's like a wall. Berad La Sharim, with 231 gates. The 231 gates, if we would write the 22 letters in a circle, we would create a circle. If we would draw a lines between those 22 letters, we would get a total 22 times 21 is 462, but since which would be 231 lines, because like the same line that connects the Aleph to the Bet is the line that connects the Bet to the Aleph. There are 231 ways to connect the 22 letters of the alphabet in 2 letters. So the basic act of creation, taking a building block and making something out of it. You know, on Shabbat, the issur of writing is writing 2 letters. And I think this gives a new understanding of that 2 letters, this is creation. Taking 2 building blocks and putting them together, this is an act of creation. Okay? So this is the circle of Sefer Yetzira. 22 letters in a circle and 231 lines showing the total number of permutations of these letters. V'chozer agalgal panim v'achor. And the circle goes back. Panim v'achor, back and forward. These letters, you could turn it both ways. Maybe expressing that reality always has a tension between these 2 sides, the panim and the achor, the face and the back. We know that talking about looking at God, we can see Moses wants to see the face of God, he ultimately sees the back of God. And this duality shows up a lot about the 2 opposing components of existence.
Likewise, the Luchot Avrit, that you can see them both-sided.
So the 2 Luchot that both sides, but there was a miracle that the both sides would look the same. Here we have the both sides that might be opposite poles, implying a positive and a negative. Because here it says, "V'siman davar, ein betova lamala ma'onig." Their onig is an expression of the highest good. Ve'ein bara lamata minega. Onig and nega, it's the same letters, but part of the reality is that the same building blocks could take us to the highest good, onig, but to the lowest of the low, which is nega. If we're already here talking about the word oneg, in the Zohar, oneg is a very special word, and it's almost like a picture. A picture because one of the fundamental images in the Zohar is the river coming out of Eden. A nahar, a river coming out of Eden in order to water the garden. So that would be in the three parts of this vision: Eden, the river, and the garden. Ayin is Eden. Under Eden is the Nahar, the Nun. And finally at the end we have the Gimel. So that would be Oneg. Ayin, Nun, Gimel. Eden, Nahar, Gan. Eden, river, garden. Okay. Ketzad. And now pretty much it explains what I said before. Sarfan, we combine them. Shaklan, we combine the letters together. Okay, that we weigh them. Hamiram, different permutations. Aleph in kulam, kulam aleph. We connect the aleph to the other 21 letters, and then all the other letters with the aleph. Bet in kulam, v'kulam in bet. We v'chazarot, chalila, v'nimsot, beresh, lamed, aleph, sharim. That's how we get to 231 gates, the 231 permutations of the 22 letters in form of two-letter permutations. By doing this, we remind ourselves that all that exists and all speech, yotzei mishem echad, it all goes back to the one. Okay, finishing this journey from all that is to the one. And again, this is the path we want to take, so that when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, in that Echad, it is Echad of all that is. Now, in Yotzei Mishem Echad, Shem Echad is Shem is Shin Mem, name, and Echad is Aleph, which reminds us that this chapter started by saying there are three primeval letters that underlie everything. And what are those letters? The Aleph, Mem, and the Shin. The Aleph represents the Avir, the Ruach, the Mem, the Mayim, the Shin, the Esh. These three primeval letters are those that stemmed from Elohim Chayim, as we saw in the first chapter. These are what forms all the other letters and everything else, and so that is another way of looking at Yotzei Mishem Echad. Comes out of one Shem, one name. So I have a story about when I once studied these two Mishnayot with students in my house. We were sitting around the table. There was a thunderstorm outside. Suddenly, the electricity went out. We started lighting candles, and to candlelight, we started talking about the commentaries here about how to create a golem. Different techniques about taking earth that was untouched, carving out the circle with the letters, saying divine names, and we felt pretty, with that atmosphere of the thunderstorm, the candles, and these commentaries, we thought as high as could be. Then my wife comes into the room and looks at us and says, "What? What are you guys talking about? Making a golem?" So she says, only men would talk about things like that. Us women, we do the real thing. We bring real life into the world. So if before we felt as high as could be, by the time she left the room, we were all the way down with plenty of humility. Okay, so I think this is a good chunk for today, because next week, this last Mishnah is a very, very significant Mishnah that will take us a whole meeting. So let's end with Sof Davar Hakol Nishma, Et Elohim Yira, Ve'et Mitzvotav Shmor, Ki Ze Kol Adam.